All right, it's been a good morning, and I know everyone's probably excited to get out to that solution showcase, the Cloud Native store, get all that good swag. So I'm going to take a little bit of your time and just really try to bring it home for us this morning. And we've had a lot of great presentations that have helped us to kind of see all the different things that are enabling, whether it's AI, security, but really some exciting announcements that really kind of play into what I want to talk to you about. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge that, we're here in Atlanta. It's the home of the Cherokee and the Muskogee Creek peoples, the land that we gather on. And I think it's a privilege to be here. If you have time, I would definitely say you should learn a little bit more about these great nations that exist here. And for me, why it's a connection is I have relatives and family that are from the Southwest, the Tohono, the Odom. And one thing about them is that we are a nation of astronomers, individuals that we have used these in our lives, and as many nations, if Native Americans have, find it to be a way of just daily life. We use it for navigating. Oftentimes we use it to try to figure out when's the right time of year to plant something, but it also has a spiritual context as well. When we face times when things are just challenging and finding direction. And I find that recently, with just everything that we've been seeing with AI and ML and all the progress, it's kind of where are we headed? How do we calibrate ourselves? And especially as a community, because I kind of look at this whole community here, and I think all of us as kind of being a tribe, or my family that I look to as well. And I oftentimes look at all right, where are we in this day and time? And one of them that I recently have gone back to was someone who had spoke recently, 2019, Brian Lyles, and I was really reflecting on kind of some of the things he gave us in this talk about in search of Kubernetes Rails moment. And Brian gave a really interesting kind of detailed narrative around the Rails and its impact on developers and what the Kubernetes community can learn from. And he kind of mentioned here that Kubernetes was not the destination. And sometimes I think about what he was saying there. And he kind of gave examples of what he thought what we could learn from the Rails community, especially when it comes from the complexity of infrastructure, just making it easy to get sane defaults. And I look at that and think about where we're at currently and think of what are those lessons that we could take from that community? The other guidance that he gave and what this would mean was that we would look at making a better Kubernetes. And that would mean that we could just make things easy for developers. And I think when we're looking at where we're at currently, and the question that really he asked was, at that moment in time in 2019 was, are we there yet? Well, I could probably say in 2025, I believe we're there. And the reason why I say that, if we look at a lot of the artifacts that have now been produced that kind of enable this, whether it's through GitOps, improving the developer experience, the maturity of platform engineering, we see that we've become a substrate. We're foundational. And really, when you think about what's coming next, because he did talk about us being this, in a vehicle, I think we could kind of look at it in this way. And what we're looking at is we're going through a change that is very interesting in the sense that in the past, we can look at Linux, for example, and it enabled the internet. It enabled us to be able to kind of start to dream and look further. And then the cloud native community kind of came in and started to help us then look at well, how can we ship workloads at scale? And this kind of gave us that ability to be able to, remove that complexity, to start to build and look bigger. And when it started off, it was very CPU bound. We were focused on a certain type of microservice workload. But then now we're seeing stateful. We're seeing all these other things that it has enabled. And if I look just now today, I think we're now seeing the emergence of what had become next. And that is AI native. And well, what does that kind of look like currently with the Kubernetes community as to where we're going? Well, if we look at the last few releases, what's interesting to kind of note is you're seeing this shift that's happening. If you look at just some of the themes that are coming out of the Kubernetes org and the CNCF org and all the contributions and directions, we're seeing these great announcements. And today you're going to hear a lot, or this whole week you'll hear about DRA. And I would highly encourage you to find out more about these things. But I think the things that do stand out is there's still a need for us to continually to innovate. Those areas that we're looking at, if we're going to get AI native, requires continual work at improving scheduling, looking at ways to kind of provide more insights and observability into these intelligent workloads that are emerging, and then as well as like, how do we get these things to production in a way that are stable and safe? And so all these things are exciting to see in a direction, but I'm going to get personal about kind of the things that start to affect me recently is like, and like a lot of us, is now we're seeing these new paradigms start to emerge that are like challenging us to think about, well, how do we get these great benefits from like something like MCP, but then, you know, how do we productionize this thing? A lot of us have already seen, you know, the advantages of using it, you know, being able to connect models and clients and tools, giving agents a way to reason and take action and learn, and it's benefiting. We see how transformational this is. But yet, a lot of the things with bringing this to production is similar to what we face here in the cloud native community. Things like scheduling, observability, trust, they're all showing up again, just in new forms. Which means in our experience in this community, it's exactly what's needed for us to make systems like MCP work at scale. And the one that's really emerged, I think we've really truly have entered the agent economy, I guess, as we'd like to put it. We know we're going through the API age. Well, it feels like now we're in this race to deploy these agentic infrastructure, systems that observe, reason, and acts. And so we're getting to that point now where Kubernetes and cloud native are no longer just looking to run ML, AI workloads. We want it to be optimized to be able to take advantage of these agents and ML workloads. So I think in just the areas that I've looked at, and I think it's the whole cloud native foundation, we're seeing this kind of like a lot of this driving and a strategy changing, is that our substrate is evolving. I think Kubernetes is one that we really are depending on to be able to be that consistent control plane, to be able to drive these new intelligent workloads. And what this requires is, you know, more topology awareness. We're seeing gang scheduling emerging, you know, being able to have adaptive orchestration so that that substrate we're building can support these intelligent workloads, and we're able to learn from a lot of the existing patterns that have been out there, such as like Slurm, these areas of that have been out there for quite a while. But intelligence isn't just about compute. It also requires us to be able to have intelligence with observability. As systems start to reason, we need to start to understand the reasons and the whys, and not just why it happened. And we're moving from where tracing requests to tracing reasoning, from metrics to meaning. It's going to be important for us here in the future. So definitely when we talk about like moments, like Brian mentioned in his talk, I think OpenTelemetry and all these projects are going to be able to have that impact, to be able to work with these agents and trace these things out. And then last, I don't want to ignore the importance of security. When workloads act on our behalf, we need to think about identity. We have projects like Spiffy, Spire. Earlier, we just saw Red Hat discuss this. And so we want to make sure agents are verifiable, that the boundaries are there, and then when autonomy works, it's built on a level of trust. But I think the thing that's going to accelerate all of these things is something that I kind of go back to. I know I'm in this product manager role, and a lot of times I hear this phrasing about, you know, how do we maximally accelerate things? And we use this as a way to kind of like think about, you know, what's possible. Can we maximally accelerate the things that we're building, focus on the right things? And I think it takes a couple of things to be able to do this. I think when you have that curiosity and you have alignment and the momentum to try to get these done, and you're seeing this in the cloud native community, I think that's when we start to create a better experience, and we're able to kind of like deliver some of the things that I mentioned earlier and be able to kind of like support these new paradigms. And I think there's a few things that I'm already seeing it manifest in the community. One of those is in regards to just cross collaboration among projects. I think recently a good example I saw was the Envoy Gateway in the recent, you know, virtual event that they had. You're seeing that they're recognizing that if we work together to get Kserve, VLLM, Envoy Gateway maintainers together, we could then create a better inferencing environment where that, you know, they wouldn't have done it alone. And so that's what open source is good at. That's when we're at our best. And so I think going forward, continually working towards that, even potentially even outside of like the CNCF. Like for example, recently we've seen the announcement with like PyTorch and Ray running on Kubernetes with other components, and that's where we really drive impact. So we're gonna need that same spirit for what's next. The other part that I think we live in, we live this, I think, here in the CNCF in regards to like how we've built community. And so I think what's going to be key is for us to share what we learn, contribute when we can, and let's try to bring clarity to a lot of this sometimes confusing AI landscape, because the next decade of AI native depends on this community staying open, curious, and connected. And I think, to be honest, that's where the acceleration is going to come from, is that when we are all aligned, AI native isn't going to just be built by one project or one company. It's going to be built by all of you, and the community is the accelerator. So when we do all these things, when we all kind of start to strategize and align in here, let me show you what this looks like. Brian challenged us to make Kubernetes better, and we did. And we'll keep doing it. So let's keep building that substrate, and let's keep making these things better. Thank you. Good.